Hello and welcome to the Talk to Defeat ALS podcast. I'm your host, Director of Communications and Public Policy here at the ALS Association Greater Philadelphia Chapter, Tony Heil. And today, I am very excited to bring to you live on a recording my guest, Scott Smith of Brick Simple. Scott is going to go into his background more, but he has worked in Hollywood on many feature films, and he's worked in technology to promote virtual reality, augmented reality, and a lot of different technologies that bring ideas to life, and not just like GE, but in a new 21st or 22nd century way. It's very exciting. And Scott is going to be part of our annual dinner coming up on Wednesday, November 28th, 2018 at V in Philadelphia. So in order to just do better than just hearing him on this podcast, seeing him in his amazing presentation, go to www.alsphiladelphia.org/annual dinner, and make sure to go to alsphiladelphia.org in general to donate, volunteer, and become an advocate. Follow us on social media at ALS Philadelphia. And of course, before we get into this, make sure to go to iTunes or Stitcher, I think, and subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to all of our interviews and discussions about how we're going to fight ALS together. With that little bit of intro into our podcast, Scott, thanks for calling in and joining us from far away in California.
Sure, Tony. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
So, Scott, you work at Brick Simple. What is Brick Simple?
Brick Simple is a Pennsylvania-based technology company that leverages both development and software for many different solutions. But one of the more exciting things that Brick does is bringing virtual and augmented reality. We like to call it mixed reality nowadays.
Everything feels like mixed reality nowadays, Scott.
It sure does. It sure does. And we at Brick Simple like to use mixed reality to solve rather sometimes simple problems in industry and healthcare.
And how long have you been at Brick Simple?
I've been working officially with Brick Simple for under a year now. But Det Anson, who is the president and founder, and I have been friends since high school. So I've had my head in the door for years, but only been official lately, in this year, since April, actually.
And Det is actually how I found out about Brick Simple. I follow him and learn from him from the different technology he promotes, and I messaged him because I heard an NPR story about how virtual reality is being used in healthcare, and said, were you guys working on this? And of course, he said, yes, this is the future. So, you're going to talk about your ideas and work both in Hollywood and potentially for ALS, but can you give us any examples about how virtual reality is being used in healthcare?
Well, one of the buzzwords in healthcare these days is patient safety. And we have one of the more successful development/hackathon products has been a hand washing application to help train healthcare workers to be more careful about how they wash their hands in hospitals and medical facilities. I think many of us know that infections, secondary infections in healthcare facilities have risen dramatically in the last few years, and Brick felt that they wanted to tackle that. And in addition, they have been doing empathy experiences for different ailments that commonly affect people around the world, so that a user who could put on goggles, or what Microsoft calls their HoloLens, which is an augmented reality device, to experience what some of these people experience day to day, using environmental sounds, images, and even transporting a person into another whole environment, maybe an apartment or a work situation.
Now, you and I have been discussing empathy for a while, and my conversations with Det, Jesse Berdinka at Brick Simple, and others, it feels like empathy is really a driving force when it comes to making a virtual reality program successful. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would absolutely say that's true. I think that empathy serves virtual reality, mixed reality, but I also think it's a rather symbiotic relationship. I believe that the technology is really just pixels and sounds, but it is being leveraged to help people experience things that they couldn't normally experience.
And I always tell people when I do our advocacy here, because that's part of my job is doing our political advocacy in Washington, D.C. and state capitals for research and care services funding. I always put things in a organization of story, hope, and plan. We're a storytelling creature. That seems to be one of the things that really separates, as far as we can tell, humans from every other animal. That's how we communicate. And you have a history of making stories. And I think those stories are about empathy too, just in a different way. So that brings us to your background. You've been in Hollywood making stories for how long now?
I started my career in Hollywood in 1999. I don't feel that old, but that is exactly how long I've been doing it. I'm coming up on 20 years next year. And yeah, indeed, storytelling is really a part of so much of our lives. And of course, when I was starting my career, I just wanted to work on cool movies. And I think this is probably true for most people, but as I matured into my career and my life, I found that I wanted to do things of more meaning than just entertaining people for 2 hours in the theater. And the backdrop to my career has always been working with people with ailments and disabilities in tandem with my Hollywood career. I've worked at a recreation center here in San Francisco, California, on and off for almost the same amount of time, maybe even longer, maybe 25 years. And I bring my kids there, and I've seen the incredible impact on people's lives from ailments like ALS and MS.
So you've heard people's stories, right? You've seen them through that volunteering experience, right? So you've seen a lot of stories in front of you, right?
Yes, absolutely, and a lot of them from beginning to end. And of course, some of that is very sad, but some of it is also very good. So the storytelling aspect is just so vital to the empathy experience, and in turn so vital to the mixed reality experience that we're creating at Brick.
And so I think that you coming to our annual dinner, and again, if you want to get your last minute tickets, it's alsphiladelphia.org/annual dinner. You are both very good at explaining the technology, but really a good conduit, a good vessel, as someone might say, of explaining this, because you have the background both in the storytelling of Hollywood and technology, and the understanding of the need for story based on that work.
Yes, and I believe that the technology should serve the storytelling, and I think it's that coming from that perspective is vital to being able to leverage technology. When it's inverted, it's not as effective. But I think that using a combination of storytelling and technology, and mostly working on films like Pirates of the Caribbean and Star Wars, teaches you a lot about story, but it also teaches you a lot about people, a lot about technology, and a lot about what people respond to visually and auditorily when it's not real.
And like you said, so you've worked on movies like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and what other movies?
Pirates of the Caribbean is probably my favorite franchise that I've worked on, as well as some independent movies from people like Wes Anderson, some even unnamed, yet to be named famous directors.
And a lot of those movies involve a lot of fantasy, right?
Yeah, almost entirely.
And so you can't just go to Doylestown and film an actual Star Wars. Um, Probably not. I go to Doylestown. I haven't been to Doylestown too often, but I haven't really seen a lot of lightsabers there. Um, and so when you're doing that, how much of your creation and working with directors and producers is about the story driving the technology, or the technology driving the story?
Well, I think the mythology of technology is always going to be part of the story, especially in science fiction. But I think in terms of the actual creation of story and experience, and really when we talk about story and visuals, what we're really asking of the human brain is to exit where they are presently sitting and enter into something that we've created. And this is really the core of the empathy experience, and I think why it's so vital that technology and story go hand in hand, because we really want to transport people from the life that they are presently in into something other. And while I enjoy working in feature films and I enjoy the Hollywood culture, and now television is really taking off as well, I love, at the heart and soul of who I am, loves using this experience to bring empathy into these different realms that previously, really only in the last few years, has anyone really thought about impacting.
And because you have all these years of experience, both as yourself and then the experience that everyone else brings at Brick Simple to these projects, you make it as real as possible, right?
Yes, as real as the technology will allow.
And because of that, people's expectations for the technology keep growing. So if you went to see King Kong from the 30s now, you don't take it as seriously as you do the more recent films.
Yes, of course. That's a constant battle, is meeting the expectations of an audience, whether it's a VR experience or whether it's a $200 million feature film. It is a constant battle. And, the general audience member isn't educated at a level that we are in terms of technology and what's possible in technology. And so your comment about expectation is absolutely right on, and it's something we're always looking to blow past. We want people to be amazed at what they see with their eyes and hear with their ears in these experiences.
And, when you talk about a lot of this, and I look over your extensive resume for Hollywood creation, which is really, to me, having someone like you come to our dinner and explain this is very exciting. And I hope that everyone that's listening is going to be excited and join us again at alsphiladelphia.org/annual dinner. But this might sound odd to you, but I'm a professional wrestling fan. I have been since I was a kid. And as you know, in professional wrestling, they're not fighting like in mixed martial arts. They're not really trying to hurt each other.
Sure.
But when you're watching a wrestling match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, for example, who are two of the best, and you probably don't know who I'm talking about, but if it looks like they're missing the kicks or that they're hurting each other gently, then it feels fake. And you're not watching a real fight, but you want to escape into that reality of a wrestling match, so it feels real. And your job, both in Hollywood and now at ALS, I'm trying to pull it into here now, is you're trying to make this virtual reality feel like your real reality.
Yes, absolutely. And to take your analogy of professional wrestling, they are using the same age-old techniques to engage an audience, and they are auditory, they are visual, they are performance, they're story. Whether you may realize it or not, you're actually pulled into the mythos of professional wrestling because you like the characters, the people, and their stories. And I'm sure Brett and the other wrestler you mentioned have two very different stories, and in that ring, their stories are colliding. So there's engagement there. It is absolutely the same for what we want to do with ALS. We want to engage an audience at every sensory level into this empathetic experience, so that people can see, feel, hear what it is like to have this ailment invade your life.
So now we've set the table for everyone listening here. We know that you have years of experience at making stories as strong as possible, to using the technology to advance reality in ways that take people from their office job to now into, the Star Wars or Pirates of the Caribbean, so they're absorbed into that. Just like someone going to a wrestling show could be absorbed into, a fight between John Cena and whomever John Cena is fighting. So that's we know that you have the capability to do that. So you're going to be here at our annual dinner again on November 28th. You'll also be here the day before to talk on live streaming on our Facebook at ALS Philadelphia for Giving Tuesday, to give some examples. How can we use this, including with your background in volunteering with people with different kind of ailments, to go from people seeing someone with ALS, hearing their story, to now feeling it and really getting that empathy and taking it and understanding it better? What can you do, or we do, with virtual reality to enhance that story to the best possible degree?
It's an excellent question, and one of the strategies that we are implementing is really more of what the games industry is doing, and I'll say with our children. They are pulling them out of their world into another one, and they are doing it with sometimes very simplistic imagery. I think back to my early years with the Atari 2600, and the size of those pixels were, a centimeter square. But my imagination was engaged at such a level at that age that when I look at it now, I can't even imagine what I was thinking back then. Why did I think this was so engaging? We want to engage the imagination, and we do that with imagery, with sound, with physical haptic response, and those are kind of the key elements. And the way to do that best is to try to make the scenery that you, as an audience member with your eyes, seem as real as possible. It is really easy to go into these situations with a really critical eye, but our goal is ultimately that we override that little part of your brain that says something isn't 100% right with the scene. This doesn't look photographically right. It doesn't look like my living room. It looks like a living room that somebody created in a computer. But within, hopefully, a matter of seconds, your brain and all of your other senses have taken over, and you've now been transported into that scene. And that is really what we want to do at Brick Simple with ALS.
And you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that you can do that for things like hand washing, which some people don't think about that with healthcare. But as you know, and you've discussed, it's one of those things where now the technology allows that story to be told, where you absorb into that. Can you give any sort of teasers of what kind of things you might be explaining you can do with this technology to make people empathize with life with ALS?
Yeah, that is excellent. I think that the neat thing about this is that we can create any experience within virtual reality, or mixed reality in this case. We can change how you hear somebody speaking. We can change, using a microphone on a headset as the person is in the experience, change how you speak and how your relative processes in your mind create sounds and words. We can actually can create software that alters that, so that you are speaking as if having a particular ailment. We can create visuals that that would look normal to your mind, and flip a switch and then create what the visuals might look like if you have ALS or if you have MS or any other empathetic experience we're trying to create. We can also create physical haptic responses using objects. So a great example might be that you get up in the morning, you go into your kitchen, you grab the orange juice container from your refrigerator and you pour it into a glass and you drink the orange juice. We can have you do that experience in VR, then flip a switch and have it so that that orange juice container weighs 4 times what it would for a normal healthy individual. And then pouring it, we can make it so that it shakes. There's all these different sensory alterations that we can do to create an empathetic experience. And I'll tell you, in a lot of the testing we've done for ALS alone, some of it is very frustrating, and I think people can probably only handle a few minutes of it before they want to take the microphone off or take the headset off. But that is ultimately, I think, we're of course not trying to annoy anybody, but we are trying to help you delve into the experience.
I think I've seen the things you're talking about. I think anyone that's just hearing this now, from your work in Hollywood and at Brick Simple, hearing things gets you to use your imagination a little bit, seeing things take it to the next stop, and then experiencing which you can do at our annual dinner on November 28th. You'll be able to see the potential for this. But I've met so many people with ALS. My grandfather had ALS. My grandmother had Parkinson's. My mom has MS. So they're all, not good genes necessarily. But for me, one thing I notice when they talk about it, there's that frustration when you have a disease like that. I'm trying to tell you, this is how it feels. And this is why I'm frustrated. And it's one thing to hear that, but now with your technology and people's support for this with their donations and advocacy, you won't be hearing someone say, I want you to understand. You'll be able to say, oh, I get it.
Yes, and we also want those people to be heard, and we want them to inform us on this experience so that exactly what they're saying is what someone like you or me would experience. And that's really important because we want them to be heard. We want them to know that we're doing very active things to raise awareness. And, it can't be understated how difficult some of this stuff is, too. It is not easy to create a virtual experience. There's nothing you can buy in the store. There's very little training out there for people in mainstream schooling. Even most art schools don't have any of this. So it requires specialized artists, technicians, technologists to all come together around this to really make it work. And we couldn't do it without the ALS Foundation, without people who are experiencing some of the symptoms to speak into this and make it as real as we possibly can.
Yeah, and you mentioned raising awareness, which is something we always want to do. We have ALS Awareness Month, we have Ice Bucket Challenge, and things along that nature. But a billboard raises awareness. But with this kind of technology, if we can make it come to a real reality in terms of producing it and bringing it to places, we can go to a sponsor and say, this is what you're giving to. We can go to a caregiver and say, this is what your person you're caring for is experiencing, so you can empathize with it better and provide better care. We can go to schools and teach those kids or teachers, this is what is real. Or we can go to Washington, D.C. and meet very well-intentioned people in Washington, D.C. or in state capitals and say, we're not just, this isn't just a list of things on a piece of paper about why you should support us. Here, feel it. You can feel what ALS is like, some of these frustrations, and why your appropriations of money is going to go a long way.
Yeah, and there is real science behind this technique. The more senses that we can involve, you mentioned a billboard. My eyes see a billboard when I'm driving my car. I look at it for a couple of seconds, and then I'm next thing I'm doing is honking at the car in front of me, and I've forgotten about the billboard. But the more senses that we can include in any kind of awareness, there is real science and math behind its effectiveness. I know industry is finding that somewhere between 30 and 40% increase in comprehension for training, safety training, sales, customer support. All of these metrics are already available to us to say to fundraisers and people we want to get on board with this project. Hey, this works, because we are including 3, maybe 4 senses. And maybe someday we can include smell, which, as we all know, is one of the most powerful senses we can engage. So I can't stress enough how valuable this tool would be to raise our awareness.
Well, you're going to learn more about this tool and learn more about Scott's background by hearing it, seeing it, and experiencing it at our annual dinner on Wednesday, November 28th. There's still tickets available. It's at The in Philadelphia. We'll also be honoring former Congressman Charlie Dent, so you could talk to him there, Scott, and get his ear and tell him, hey, make sure people understand this. And we'll be having the Flame of Hope section honoring a lot of great individuals who've contributed to our mission. A presentation by our friends at the Philadelphia Phillies, and so they'll be seeing the potential here too. And it's going to be an unforgettable night. Register now. Get your tickets at alsphiladelphia.org/annual dinner. I don't think you want to miss it. You want everyone to come, right, Scott?
Yes, absolutely.
Scott's coming all the way from California, so you can come from Delaware County or New Jersey or Delaware or Philadelphia. If he can make it from California, you can make it from around here. So get your tickets today at alsphiladelphia.org/annual dinner. And thanks, Scott, so much for making virtual reality more of a real reality for the ALS cause.
Yeah, thank you, Tony, and thank you for everybody listening.